Welcome to Average Joe's Pool. Now if you're serious about your pool, when it comes to pool balls, you'll know that there's only one serious option, phenolic resin. But they're expensive, right? Not necessarily. Let's take a look at Dynaspheres Tungsten. So what we have here, these are the Dynaspheres Tungsten Ball Set that Dynaspheres have kindly supplied us for review. And if you haven't heard of the Dynaspheres brand before, they are a Belgian company and all of their phenolic resin balls are manufactured in China. Now when it comes to the Dynaspheres product lineup, they've had a bit of a change around recently. It used to be that they had 4 sets which were tungsten followed by silver, gold and platinum sets. But all that has now changed because Dynaspheres have recently updated their product ranges. And so now we have the tungstens, which are the cheapest of the 4 available sets, followed by vanadium, rhodium and palladium. And as mentioned before, tungsten was previously available and the new palladium set are actually the previous platinums, whereas the new vanadium and rhodiums are entirely new. When it comes to price, the tungstens are very well priced considering these are a set of genuine phenolic resin balls. Current price on these is just $109.95 and they are available to buy on Amazon. Speaking of which, we will be adding Amazon links into the video description for these balls, so if you're interested in picking up a set, please be sure to help support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool. Please be sure to click on our Amazon links. So now we know a little bit about our tungstens, let's delve in a little bit more detail. Let's take a look at the spec check. When it comes to Dynaspheres tungstens, they come in this rather swish looking retail box. And when you open up this box, you'll also notice that they come complete with a cleaning cloth. Now the most important thing when it comes to these is to realise that these are genuine phenolic resin. Now if you're new to pool, it's worth noting that all pool balls are made from resins, but the majority of them, especially the cheaper ones, are all made from polyresins rather than phenolic resin. And so what precisely is phenolic resin? Well, phenolic resin, quite simply, is a super durable and hard type of resin, so much so that it makes it the ideal material from which to make pool balls. And it's important to note that the WPA require all pool balls that are to be used in any of their tournaments, they must be made from phenolic resin. Polyresins just don't cut the mustard. So not only is phenolic resin a lot harder than polyresins, which gives the balls a much more solid hit and feel, but also additionally it's far more durable, which means that these balls should last you for decades. And because phenolic resin wears much slower than polyresins, it tends to be more forgiving on your pool table cloth. So as a long-term investment, using phenolic resin balls means that you won't have to replace your pool table cloth quite as often. Now, despite the fact that phenolic resin is the industry standard when it comes to professional standard pool equipment, there are only currently 2 manufacturers in the world for phenolic resin pool balls. Chances are you may well have heard of Dynaspheres' main competitor already, because they've been around for a number of decades, and that company is called Aramith. And compared to Aramith, Dynaspheres are the comparative new kids on the block. And one interesting point when it comes to the 4 different Dynaspheres sets is that they manufacture them all from an identical resin. And so unlike their competitors, it doesn't matter whether you're buying the cheapest set of Dynaspheres or the most expensive set, because they're all made from 100% identical resin. And so taking a quick look at the design that we have here on the tungstens, these are definitely a very much retro inspired set. Now rather than having a traditional white circle with a black number inside, instead we don't have any white circles on these whatsoever. We have a black surrounding circle, and within that circle we have the numbers, which are all in quite a modern sans serif font. And the cue ball that we have in this set actually comes with 2 black opposing triangles, and that can be really useful for helping you visually monitor the amount of spin that you apply on the ball. And I believe that this cue ball is actually an upgrade for the new version of the tungstens in the new packaging. I know for a fact that the previous version came with a plain white cue ball, so this is the upgraded set. When it comes to colours, as you can see, we do have a couple of colour variations in this set. First of all, our numbers 2 and 10, which are traditionally blue. In this set, they are a very light blue, bordering on a turquoise. And the number 6 and 14 balls, instead of being the more traditional green, are actually grey. And our 7 and 15 balls, which are traditionally maroon, are definitely brown in the tungsten set. And additionally, the numbers 4 and 12, which are traditionally purple, are also purple in this set, but they are a much lighter purple than you would traditionally find. So now we've got a bit of a feel for our Dynaspheres Tungsten set. We need to go ahead and start the testing process, starting with the technical tests. So first of all, we need to weigh the balls using a calibrated scale to check if the balls meet the WPA requirements, and also to see how consistent the weight is across the set. And the WPA requires all balls to weigh between 5.5 and 6 ounces. And when it comes to the tungstens, they achieve this with ease, with all balls hitting the WPA specification. And we had an overall average ball weight of 5.944 ounces. And the heaviest ball in our set was actually the cue ball, coming in at 5.985 ounces. And the lightest ball in our set was the number 6, which weighed in at 5.896 ounces. This gives us a weight variance across our set of 1.51%. And taking a quick look at our weight variance rankings for phenolic resin balls, we can see that this places the tungstens currently in 9th place, sitting just behind Dynaspheres' top of the range Palladium set. And remembering that this is very much a budget price set, it's a decent result, coming in a touch better than both the Aramith Continentals and also the Aramith Crowns. So overall, it's an excellent result on weight for the tungstens, scoring them a perfect budget-friendly 5 stars out of 5 for weight. Next up, we'll measure the tungstens using a calibrated micrometer, and once again ensure that they meet the WPA requirements, and also to check for consistency across the set. And the WPA requires all balls to measure 2 1/4 inches, which is 57.15 millimeters, with a permitted tolerance as shown here on screen. And the tungstens came in with an average size of 57.088 millimeters. However, we do have an issue here, as one of our balls measured in undersized, and therefore is also the smallest ball in our set, and this was our number 6 ball, which fell below the WPA's minimum requirement by 0.126 of a millimeter, measured in at 56.897 millimeters. And thankfully this only affected this one ball in our set, with all of the other balls meeting the WPA specification. And the largest ball in our set was the number 2 ball, which measured in at 57.160 millimeters, which gives us an overall size variance across the set of 0.46%. And taking a look at our top 10 rankings for phenolic resin ball set sizes. And unfortunately at 0.46% with one ball undersized, this means that the tungstens drop right off of the list, with a variance between 2 and 4 times that of most of the balls on our top 10 list. And so unfortunately it's not a great result for the tungstens. And thankfully at the lower price point we can be a little bit more forgiving. But the bottom line is the tungstens have let themselves down here, scoring them an at best average 2.5 stars out of 5 for size. So with our weight and size testing complete, we've now covered the technical side of testing, so we're moving on to the more fun stuff. We need to get these out and start playing with them. And here at Average Joe's Pool, all products that we review have a minimum of 5 hours use before we formulate an opinion, to make sure we can give a fair and honest review. And so if you're ready, it's tungsten time. Let's play. So when it comes to the Dynaspheres Tungstens, first of all I should say that these are definitely a very decent and solid feeling ball set. They've been a pleasure to play with, they seem very well weighted, haven't noticed any issues with roll. Overall, playing with these has been a very positive experience. This is actually the fourth set of Dynaspheres balls that we've tested, and the standout feature without question has to be our cue ball. Just like in our other three Dynaspheres sets, the cue ball that we have here in the tungsten set is absolutely first rate. What's quite amazing when it comes to the Dynaspheres cue balls is just how resistant they are when it comes to chalk retention. You'll get hardly any chalk that remains on this cue ball. And of course that's a massive bonus when it comes to reducing the likelihood of cling, also known as skid or kick. And not only that, but these cue balls also seem to be very resistant to general wear marks. I've been doing lots of jump shots with this. I've jumped off the table a couple of times, and all you do is wipe it over with a cloth, and I can't see any trace of any mark on this cue ball whatsoever, and that's pretty impressive. So when it comes to our cue ball, definitely full marks, 10 out of 10. And a nice added extra that we have on this cue ball, of course, is we have the two opposing triangles. And so what we have here is not a fully spotted cue ball. Spotted cue balls generally have 6 spots rather than 2. However, having the 2 spots is enough to kind of get a visual feedback as to the amount of spin that's actually on the ball. And no, with only 2, it's not perfect, and you do have a couple of blind spots. But I've got to say, with 2, it's probably a lot more effective than I thought it would be. So when it comes down to cue balls, I would say that Dynasphere are almost in a league of their own. So when it comes to performance, we definitely do have a nice set here. However, I did spot a few issues. So issue number 1, on about half of these balls, the 4 ball is particularly bad. You can actually feel these black numbers and circles are ever so slightly raised. Now it is very subtle, but you can just about feel that when you run your finger over it. Like I said, this affects about half the balls that we have in this set. And unfortunately, of course, if we can actually feel that we have something that's raised on the ball, then it's impossible for this ball to be 100% round. Now, as I said, it is very subtle, and I didn't really notice any effect of this, either making contact with any of the balls or in the way that the balls roll. However, what I did find is that you actually get a little bit paranoid about this. And what I found is when I was running drills, when I put the balls down, I'd actually put the ball down in a way that the number was definitely not going to make contact with the cue ball. And I found myself doing that every time when I was purposefully placing the balls for my drills. And this was just because I was simply paranoid that if the cue ball was going to make contact with the number, which is not 100% flat, then that might cause an issue. Like I said, in reality, I didn't actually spot any ill effects. And of course, when I was playing, I wasn't rotating the balls at all. I didn't notice any effects, but this shouldn't be raised. So that was definitely my main concern when it comes to the tungstens. I did spot a couple of other very minor things related to colour. So first of all, not having a white circle as a background for the number definitely makes the numbers a little bit harder to read. And this does affect some colours more than others. For example, if you take a look at the 7, what we have here is a brown ball with black text. And as you can imagine, that is a particularly difficult colour combination to be able to see the number quite easily. It would be far, far easier to see those numbers if they did have that white circle behind them. But of course, if we did have that white circle, this set would be a completely different looking set. It would be a far more traditional looking set. What we have here is kind of a retro vibe going on, and so really that's kind of part of the character of this set. And when it comes down to actually playing, the only numbers I really had an issue with are the blue numbers 2 and 10. Now traditionally the 2 and 10 ball are dark blue, however in the tungsten set that we have here they've changed that colour to an almost turquoise. And what I found having a tournament blue cloth is the blue that we have here almost blends into the table a little bit more than I would like. Yes, thankfully the shade is a few shades lighter than tournament blue, but we're definitely in the same kind of area. And so as far as contrast goes, for my personal taste, I'd like to see more contrast on the blues in this set. However, of course, if you don't have a tournament blue cloth, then that's not going to actually affect you in any way, shape or form. But maybe you have the new shark grey cloth, in which case the numbers 6 and 14 might throw up an issue. So taking all that into account, let's go ahead and score our Dynaspheres Tungsten for performance. The Dynaspheres Tungsten set is definitely a lovely set to play with, but it is let down by the very slightly raised black elements, which affected around half the balls in our set to varying degrees. It didn't seem to have any adverse effect on the balls during play, but it definitely created some unwelcome paranoia. But thankfully the Tungstens are very much a budget set, and so absolutely do offer very decent performance at their price point, scoring them a respectable 3.5 stars out of 5 for performance.
Loyal citizens, you're about to see the death sport make history.
So for quality, from a visual perspective, what we have here is a stunning looking ball set. They're nice and bright and vibrant, and they have a really high gloss finish. So for the tungsten set, we do have a few colour changes from the traditional pool ball colours. Now to offset this, thankfully the font that's been used on these balls is a very clear font to read. And I must say that I feel that Dynaspheres have actually made the right move when it comes to the colours that are used, remembering the design that they have. I think that having these colours does actually help benefit this set, especially with that kind of retro vibe. And they definitely make them stand out against other pool balls on the market. What you've got here is definitely a very bright, happy, vibrant looking set. Another small thing that's worth pointing out is the numbers that are on these balls. They are opposing and they are upside down when you spin that ball around. And this is actually a requirement of the WPA. They require them to be on opposite sides of the ball, and literally as you spin it around vertically, one should be upside down compared to the other. So when that ball rolls towards you, the number is always up the same way. But when you spin it this way, one should be upside down, the other up the right way. It's worth mentioning that the Dynaspheres Palladiums, which are their top of the range set at $330, don't actually have this, even though it is a WPA requirement. They definitely drop the ball when it comes to the Palladium set in that regard, but on their cheapest ball set that we have here, it's absolutely spot on and meets those WPA requirements in that respect. Now, speaking of WPA requirements, from a technical standpoint, these balls would not actually meet the WPA's requirements. And that's for the simple reason that the WPA requires all balls to have a white circular background to the numbers. And of course that's something that we don't have with the tungsten set. Now, does that actually affect the performance of the balls? No, it doesn't affect them in any way, shape or form. But what that technically means is the tungsten set would not be suitable for use in professional tournaments. Yes, it's true, you might not be able to use these in professional tournaments, but really this is a budget orientated set. This is designed for home use. So from that respect, the tungstens are definitely fit for purpose. However, when it comes down to quality, we do have two issues with our tungsten set. First of all was the issue that we had with size. In our particular set here, we had one ball that was undersized with regards to the WPA requirements. Now, putting that into context, it was actually in our set our number 6 ball, and it measured in at 0.126 millimeters under. And so we are talking very, very minor fractions. That's less than 1/10 of a millimeter. And it didn't seem to have any effect on the balls, had no problem racking these balls, had no problems whatsoever playing with these. And as I have mentioned in the past, when it comes to size differences as minute as that, you could probably give this set to a top level professional player, have him run 100 racks with them, and then say to him, which of these balls was the one that was 0.1 millimeter out? And I'm sure he wouldn't be able to tell you. So from a practical standpoint, it's probably not the biggest issue in the world. However, that doesn't make it right. Those WPA specifications exist for a reason, and that is the exact specification that ball manufacturers ensure that they manufacture their products to. So that's definitely a shame and is not a quality issue that we should be experiencing. And secondly, and I think probably far more importantly, was the simple fact that on these balls, on about half of them, you can feel that the number or the circle around it are very, very slightly raised. Now, as I mentioned earlier in performance, it didn't actually have any negative effects with regards to playing with these balls, but this is definitely something we should not be seeing. When you have an issue such as this means that this ball cannot be 100% perfectly round. Now, I do appreciate that this is a budget orientated set. However, when you're looking at budget orientated sets from other manufacturers of phenolic resin balls, we're not seeing the same type of issues. And as I mentioned in performance, this does make you a little bit paranoid, and so you end up losing a little bit of trust in this brand new ball set that you've just bought. And unfortunately, a problem such as this is going to be all down to quality control. And in the factory, they should be measuring these balls for roundness as part of the quality control procedure. And if I can feel it with my thumb, then the equipment they're using, which is probably 100 times more sensitive than my thumb, should be able to pick that up in a heartbeat. And so in my opinion, I have about half the balls in this set that shouldn't really have passed quality control. And this really is a shame because we've got such a great product here and it's just let down by small imperfections in that quality control. If they could tighten this up at the factory, then Dynaspheres really are going to knock it out the park. They're so close. The quality on the tungstens is generally excellent, with vibrant colours, a high gloss finish and a great retro look. But unfortunately they do let themselves down a little in a couple of areas. Most notably, once again, is the ever so slightly raised numbers and circles. But there's no denying that what we have here is definitely a great quality set, just not quite perfect, scoring them a very worthy 3 stars out of 5 for quality.
You gotta get a better attitude towards things. Look at us.
So at just $110, it would seem that we have excellent value for money when it comes to the tungstens. Now of course what we have here is a set of genuine phenolic resin balls, and not only that, when it comes to Dynaspheres, Dynaspheres make all of their ball sets from an identical resin. Doesn't matter whether you're buying their top of the line set at $330 or the tungstens at 110, the resin will be identical. And that really is a huge plus point when it comes to their main competitor Aramith. They have several different types of resin and they reserve the better resins for the higher sets. When it comes to Dynaspheres, it's quite the opposite. Doesn't matter what set you get, the resin will be the same. When it comes down to value, we definitely need to consider our cue ball. And the first plus with this cue ball is we do have the 2 opposing triangles. That helps you visualize that spin when you add in English to the ball. And remembering we are at $110 for this set, you're not going to get anything from Aramith that has a spotted ball included anywhere near this kind of price. Additionally, this is the identical cue ball that's used in Dynaspheres Vanadium set, which is their next set up in price. That costs an extra $50 over the tungsten for the identical cue ball. And also the Dynaspheres cue balls really do seem to be in a league of their own. In some of Aramith's cheaper sets you get cue balls that do feel a little bit cheap and they tend to mark up quite easily. However, all of the Dynasphere balls that we've come across, the cue balls in all of their sets, have been absolutely superb. And when it comes to phenolic resin ball sets at this kind of price, there aren't actually that many options. So we have the tungstens here at $110. The closest competitor to these would probably be the Aramith crowns at $120. Additionally, Aramith do also manufacture a continental set. However, the quality of those is certainly not up to the quality of the tungstens, and so really the main competitor would be the Aramith crowns. Now in the Aramith crown set we do have a slightly more traditional design. We do have that white background to the numbers. Although when it comes to the stripe balls in the crown set, the number is actually on the white pole of the ball rather than in the stripe. And additionally, of course, we're not going to get this excellent and also spotted cue ball with the crown set. But we do have to remember, of course, that we did have a couple of quality issues when it came to the tungstens. First of all, we had the undersized ball, and of course we have the slightly raised numbers on these balls that affects about half the balls in this set. And when we compare that to the Aramith crowns in our test set, all of those balls came in spot on for weight and size, and additionally you definitely cannot feel any raised numbers. And so unfortunately, bearing those faults in mind, it's actually very hard to recommend the tungstens against the crowns, even though these are $10 cheaper. And as I mentioned before, that is a real shame. I definitely have a soft spot for the Dynaspheres tungstens, and Dynaspheres are so close to getting it 100% right. So let's go ahead and score the tungstens for value. At just $110 for a set of genuine phenolic resin balls that come complete with a dual spotted cue ball, there's no question we're in very solid territory when it comes to value. However, with some unfortunate minor imperfections, they do fall a little bit short of their competing products in the marketplace, including the Aramith crown set. But the tungstens still offer excellent overall value for money, scoring them a very solid 4 stars out of 5 for value. So next we need to award the Dynaspheres Tungstens with an official Average Joe's rating. And to do this we simply take our scores from across the 5 test categories and then we'll calculate the average. And the Tungstens cross the finishing line with a very respectable Average Joe's rating of 3.6 stars. And so they may have fallen short of true greatness. But if you're in the market for a budget set of phenolic resin balls and like the look of these, then these are definitely worth checking out. And so, Dynaspheres Tungstens, should you buy them? We've already heard the pros and the cons as we've worked our way through the review. Well, at $110 there really aren't a massive amount of options when it comes to phenolic resin balls. If you're not really sold on the Aramith crowns, maybe you don't like the look of them, and you've fallen in love with the retro look of this set, then maybe that's enough to overlook some of the minor niggles that we found during our testing. And so, as they say, the ball is entirely in your court. If you are interested in buying yourself a set of the Dynaspheres Tungstens, then please do remember we will be adding those Amazon links into the video description. And so if this video has been helpful for you, please be sure to help support us in return, and please be sure to click on our Amazon links. And before you leave us, we always ask you take 1 second out of your busy schedule just to please, at the very least, be sure to click on that like button. It really does help us out. And whilst you're there with your finger on the trigger, why not also hit that subscribe button and also switch on notifications, then you'll find out about all of our upcoming videos. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
There was a worm in my egg cream.
What?